looking at a theme of the high watch of oneness. The high watch of oneness. That is, when we're holding a consciousness of oneness coming from that place. And the value is integrity. The value is integrity. And the book that we're working from this month is, If You Know Who You Are, You Will Know What to Do. If you know who you are, you will know what to do. And it turns out Ron Greer, who wrote this book, is a United Methodist minister in Atlanta, Georgia. And he came across this statement, if you know who you are, you will know what to do, in a story he heard from World War II Holland. There was a gentleman there who was a lay missionary with the Dutch church, name of Hendrik Kramer. And at that time, during World War II, the Gestapo was in charge of Holland. And they were hauling off Dutch Jews to Dachau and Buchenwald. And so a group of Dutch laypersons came to Hendrik Kramer, and they asked him, Dr. Kramer, what shall we do? Our neighbors are dying. We don't know what is going to become of us as a nation. Please, please, if you can, tell us what to do. We have got to do something, and we've got to do it now. And Hendrik Kramer said to them, I am not going to tell you what to do, but I will tell you who you are. And if you know who you are, then you will know what to do. He opened his Bible to 1 Peter and began to read. You are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a dedicated nation, and a people claimed by God as his own, to proclaim the triumphs of him who has called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Dr. Kramer closed his Bible. Do you know who you are? Then you'll know what to do. Thanking him, the group left his home. That night, they formed the Dutch resistance. So this is all about integrity. Now, the American Heritage Dictionary defines integrity as the state of being unimpaired, or the quality or condition of being whole or undivided. And it also, the third definition, is steadfast adherence to a strict moral code or ethical code. So integrity means wholeness. It comes from the Latin integer, which means whole, integrated, complete. You know, in mathematics, you have an integer. That's a whole number. So this is all about wholeness. Now, he separates it into two things. He separates it into personal integrity and then moral integrity. So he begins talking about personal integrity, and he says it's much more than about not telling a lie, because we've come to equate integrity with honesty, but it's about more than not telling a lie. It's about not lying to ourselves. It's about not lying to ourselves. And it's not just about telling the truth, it's about being true to who we are. When we talk about a chosen people, we are talking about the fact that we choose to be chosen. We choose to be those incarnations of God that we are meant to be, that we came here to be. Each of us an individualized expression of one energy, one life force. Mahatma Gandhi said, happiness is when what you think, what you say, and what you do are in harmony. Happiness is when what you think, what you say, and what you do are in harmony. And the opposite of integrity is hypocrisy, which comes from the Greek word hypocrites, which meant actors, people who put on masks and acted different parts. That's where that word hypocrite comes from. And of course, he talks about the parable of the prodigal son. When we're talking about wandering off your path, this is a very frequently told story of a young man who went to his father and asked him for his inheritance. And so the father gave him his inheritance, and he took off from the farm, went into the city, and like a lot of young people, he experimented. You see all these commercials on television, and there's all these people partying, and they're drinking, Absolute vodka, and they're drinking, Corona beer or whatever. It's sort of like, okay, so alcohol must be involved in happiness, right? And then there's, and then you have to party. That's what it's all about, And so he did. He drank, he did whatever, and he partied hardy until he ran out of money. And then he realized he didn't have a whole lot of skills, and he ended up, this nice Jewish boy, feeding pigs, feeding corn to the pigs. And so there he was, hungry, disheveled, feeding corn to pigs. And it says he came to himself. Something happened in that moment, and he came to himself. He remembered who he was. And he thought, I could do better as a servant in my father's house than this. So he swallowed his pride and returned home. And his father ran down the road to welcome him because he thought he was dead. He hadn't heard from him. He had no idea what had happened to him. And so he welcomed him. They had a feast, and they celebrated his coming home. That's what happens when we wander off the path. There is no judgment involved. There is only the realization that we were always loved. We were always welcomed. It was us who felt we were separate. In the San Francisco Ballet production of The Prodigal Son, they have the man who plays the prodigal actually climb into the arms of his father. It's a very powerful scene to see this grown man climb into the arms of his father and his father embrace him like a child. This is the welcome that we have when we remember who we are. I remember a time in my life when I had an excellent job at a good salary, at a great apartment in a great location. I had a wonderful partner. I had friends. I thought my life was complete. I had everything that was supposed to make me happy. And yet there was like this little, something's not complete here. Something is not complete. And so a friend of mine invited me to a workshop, and I began doing my spiritual practice again, which I had not done since I was about 20, when I left the Catholic Church. I used to do the rosary every day when I was 20. But then I left it all. I said, hey, if I can go to hell for eating meat on Friday, I can do a lot more fun things than that. And I did. But then I came home to myself. I came home to that spiritual practice. And I realized that connecting with my spirit on a daily basis was a really valuable and important thing to do. It's about establishing a relationship with ourself with a capital S. We talk about our small s self and our capital S self, which is that which lives in that inner sanctuary of our heart. That is the truth of who we are, the immortal us, the one that has been here before and will be somewhere after this. And we don't know exactly where or what that is, but we know that the soul is on an ever-expanding journey. And so in truth, we can never, wander far from our path because it's only us who's creating that separation from God. It's our feeling separate that creates that separation because it's not real. It's not real. So, the thing about the prodigal son was that in trying to discover who he was, he became disconnected from what he was. And we do too. We do too. So, Greer invites us to embrace the thought that faithful living is not, does it feel good, but does it feel right? Does it feel good or does it feel right? And we know the difference. We know the difference. So, the first thing we have to do is to discover who we are. So we have to ask ourselves some questions. And he enumerates the questions we might be asking ourselves, like, what do I value? What do I believe? What is important? What is precious? And what is sacred to me? What is sacred to me? And of course, in order to find the answers to these questions, we have to follow the injunction of the psalm that says, be still and know. We have to take these questions into the stillness and invite those answers to be revealed to us so that we can know who we are. And then, once we've discovered who we are, we have to claim it. We have to claim who we are out in the world. I remember last week I was at a gathering and we were talking about religion and things, and another woman and I began to recite the Apostles' Creed. I believe in God the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth. Da, 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 da. If you were a Catholic, you recited this every Sunday. And, the thing was, it became a rote saying, but it wasn't necessarily something you believed or embraced. And so the question is, what do you really believe and embrace? What is it we believe? Greer also says, those outside of me can inform me and even inspire me, but never define me. They can inform me, they can inspire me, but they can't define me. We have to do that work ourselves. So, there's a big debate about nature and nurture and what makes us the people that we become. But it's really also about choice. We get to choose. We're the choosers. It always amuses me that the word heretic means the choosers. Because we've chosen to believe what our inner guidance tells us is true. Because it resonates with our soul. So we have that wonderful experience of claiming who we are. And then we have to live who we claim we are. And he tells a story about going on a flight, and he's at the airport, and he's in line, and he sees this girl, and she's saying, is it our turn to go yet? They were calling, section 1 and 2, and she said, is it our time to go? And the person with her said, no, not yet. And he realized that she was developmentally disabled. And so she ends up on the plane, sitting in the seat ahead of him. And so she comes in and she says she's very small and frail. She looks much younger than she is. He realizes she's probably older than she appears, but she's just very slender and tiny. And then a bunch of college boys, he called them the Animal House crew, come on the plane. And they're all joking around and laughing and having a great old time. And they are cool. They are spending a lot of their time making sure everybody knows that they are cool. So they're sitting in the plane, and this girl, as they're taxiing down the runway, the girl leans over towards one of the college kids and says to him, I get nervous when we take off. Would you hold my hand? So Greer is sitting there. He's holding his breath to see what this boy is going to do. And the boy reaches out and takes her hand. And so for the rest of the taxi down the runway and for the flight, for the takeoff, they hold hands. And then when the tires come up, she lets his hand go. And then he reads his Harry Potter, and she listens to her iPod. And when they're getting ready to land, he sees the young man turn to her, and he can't hear because the plane is making too much noise, but he sees him say the words, do you need to hold my hand? And apparently she didn't. So apparently landings were not as crazy for her. But that young man went against all the coolness that was required of him by his peers to be who he was, to help this girl. So we are given opportunities always to do the right thing. And what he says is when he looks back on his life, Greer looks back on his life, most of his regrets are not for moments when he did something wrong or hurtful, but when something was called for, some word, some action, some deed, and from within me, he heard his soul calling him to act and did nothing. Out of my passivity came my hypocrisy, he says. Feeling one way and doing another. Benjamin Franklin said, as we must account for every idle word, so must we account for every idle silence. As we must account for every idle word, so we must account for every idle silence. And I found that to be true. When I found a thought come up for me. I remember that there was a situation, and it might have been the riots in LA, when there was just this whole feeling of racial tension. And I was driving through Berkeley, and I stopped behind a car, and in the car ahead of me, it was one of those station wagons that has a seat that faces the back, and there was a young African-American man sitting in that seat, and he looked at me with such hate in his eyes. And so I didn't flinch. I mean, I looked him straight in the eye, and this was really before I got into this whole spiritual practice oneness thing, but I looked him in the eye, and what I wanted to do, I really wanted to do, was to flash him the peace sign. That's what I wanted to do, but I didn't do it. I didn't do it. And I'm not sure why I didn't do it. It was sort of like, didn't seem like the thing you know, I don't know. But it's a moment I regret because I didn't do what I was called to do. And so many times that's where we lose our integrity, is in not doing what we're called to do. So when we wander off our path, and we all wander off our path, this is not a unique experience for even the most, this guy's been a minister for 40 years, he still wanders off the path. So the thing we do is we ignore the integrity. And he quotes J.R. Ewing, remember Dallas? And he said, once you ignore integrity, the rest is easy. So, we do with we go with what feels good rather than what feels right, because maybe having to confront that person about something we've done feels uncomfortable and makes us anxious. But we know it's the thing to do. We have to clean this up, but we don't, because it doesn't feel good. And it's really important that we deal with what feels right. The other thing we do is rationalize. And he quotes this ethicist, John Truslow, who explains it this way: when other people violate the moral order, they seem to be bad people. When I do it, I've got pretty good reasons. And he brings up Thomas Jefferson, who wrote, "All men are created equal," and at the same time, he was a slave owner. And he justified owning slaves as an economic necessity for farmers and plantation owners. But he really knew that he was violating his own truth by saying that. The other thing that happens when we wander off our path is that we choose a path that is not ours. And by that, I mean, sometimes we try to do something that we think is a good idea. We think, well, I should volunteer for blah, 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 because it's the right thing to do. But then when we're doing it, it doesn't feel right. But we think, okay, well, I have to do it even if it doesn't feel right because it's the good thing to do. But he's saying, you need to find the good things that are yours to do. What are your gifts? What is yours to do? Each of us has to figure out, where are those places that we can do good in the world, where we can give our gifts? We're not taking someone else's path. We're taking our own path. And he talks about people who may have had success in their early years, their glory days. My dad was the drama star of his high school. I mean, I met a person on a plane like 40 years after he graduated from high school, and this woman knew who my father was because, oh, Charlie Howard, yes, he was great. And, they were all thinking he was going to go to Hollywood and be a big star. And, he became a lithographer. And, because his father said, you need to get a job, son. And so he did. And he became a journeyman lithographer. He was an artist in his own way, but this was not the life he had chosen. And so he lived from that glory day of his high schools until he was probably in his 60s, and he finally realized he needed to live now. So, we have to realize when things end, there is something else if we're flexible. Darwin said, it's not the strongest who survive, it's the most flexible. So it's about learning flexibility and realizing where our gifts and talents are now and how to give them now. All right, so we are all wanderers. We all go off the path. But it's important for us to have a daily practice of some kind, because we're establishing a relationship with that inner self. And I don't know about you, but do you appreciate friends who call you just to dump on you? I don't. You know, we want friends who connect with us in the good times as well as the bad times. And so we have to connect with our spiritual connection in the good times as well as the bad times. You know, they say there are, no atheists in the foxholes, right? That's what everybody's praying. But if you have a daily practice, then it's not a unique experience. You already have that connection. You already have that relationship. So, reading, meditation, prayer, journaling, singing, dancing, reflecting with people you trust. Do these practices. Do your practice. Give your gift. Ernest Holmes says we should never lose sight of the fact that the soul is on the pathway of an endless and ever-expanding experience, and that only by expansion can it evolve. This does not mean that we should cast away any good the old has to offer, but that we convert it into a greater good. Accepting the lessons and experiences of the past and taking the best from everything, we should press boldly forward, looking ever for the truth and ever ascending higher and higher into the heavens of reality. In truth, no mistakes have been made. We're each here in this moment, the moment of choice by divine appointment. The wonderful mystic, poet, Sufi, Rumi says, "Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. It doesn't matter. Ours is not a caravan of despair. Come, even if you have broken your vows 1,000 times. Come yet again. Come, come." And so let's do our affirmation. I celebrate myself and the path I am on. I celebrate myself and the path I am on. I celebrate myself and the path I am on. I celebrate myself and the path I am on. And we are going to do our new minister covenant. So let us do that together as well, because we're setting a high intention for our new minister. And I just want to let you know, although my contract expires at the end of the year, I am not going away at the end of the year because I'm staying until we get a new minister, or hopefully by the end of February, I'll still be here. So I'm not just going to, fade into the woodwork on January 1st. I'm going to still be here. Okay, for a while. All right. So we're going to say together our new minister covenant. God has promised, so powerful is the light of unity that it can illuminate the whole earth. Purpose, my new ministry is the unity that I am. I see my new minister empowering our thriving spiritual community. The universal intentions for our new minister are to inspire me to live in unity as an expression of love, to awaken the wisdom within, to embody the consciousness of wholeness in community and organizational well-being. The community intentions for my new minister are to offer mystical teachings that illuminate the science of mind principles, to be a loving and beneficial presence in the greater community in support of social activism. And so it is.